Garrison Brown's funeral was not only a sorrowful goodbye to a beloved son, brother, and friend, it blew open the years of festering grief, hypocrisy, and unspoken tension that's been churning inside the Brown family. What could have been a peaceful, dignified place for their sorrow devolved into an unspoken maelstrom of icy stares, emotional disconnection, and for a few, full-blown incredulity. Fans who've been watching the Sister Wives drama for well over a decade were surprised when Mykelti, herself a longtime defender of Robyn and Kody, confessed that Robyn showed up at Garrison's funeral with what she quite straightforwardly characterized as a bad attitude. Yes, Robyn, the self-declared peacemaker, the one who so frequently frames herself as the most hurt by the family drama, supposedly made the sacred space all about her. And this time, it wasn't just online critics pointing fingers. It was Mykelti herself, the very daughter who once appeared fiercely loyal to Robyn, who seemed to turn a blind eye to years of blatant favoritism and neglect, suddenly let a crack form in that loyalty. Hi friends, I'm Mia, and welcome back to Reality Recap. If you're as invested in the emotional mess of this family as I am, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. We get to the true reality behind the TV. And hey, leave a comment, because I need to hear your opinion on this change of allegiance. Fans aren't just surprised, they're outraged. And the big question on everyone's mind is the same one I'm asking. What finally made Mykelti break her silence and call Robyn out? It all boiled down when Mykelti wrote on Patreon regarding a TikTok video where someone was walking through Robyn and Kody's house. Her response? Instant fury. She was furious that a stranger had walked through their home, handled their personal belongings, and violated what she perceived as inviolable family boundaries. Her tone was anguished, protective, biting, deeply intimate. And you know what? I understood it. Nobody likes to see their parents' privacy desecrated like that. But even as I heard her zealous justification, I couldn't help but feel queasy brewing inside me. Because for a person who speaks so readily when Robyn is insulted, where was that same fervor when her own siblings were hurting? Where was her voice when Isabel was shipped out of state for spinal surgery, alone, without a father figure by her side? There was no emotional commentary, no outrage from Mykelti. Nothing was said. When Savannah was huddled in a cold trailer through winter, when Robyn and Kody were living luxuriously in their newly constructed home, paid for by family funds, again, silence. Not even a whisper. And when Garrison, struggling with mental health issues and tortured by his estrangement from his father, cracked on camera, sobbing over being dismissed, Mykelti remained silent. It's baffling. It's painful. And fans? They took notice. So now we need to ask, is Mykelti really oblivious to the greater dysfunction, or is she choosing to be? To ignore the hurt of her siblings just to remain in close proximity to the only set of parents still paying attention to her. Because as heartbreaking as it seems, there are children in big families who learn to be faithful to those who give them even the smallest morsels of approval, even if it means remaining quiet while the people they love are left behind. And that silence? It's now speaking louder than words ever did. The contradictions are impossible to ignore. Kody's favoritism of Robyn and her kids hasn't been a secret. It's unfolded before the very cameras for years. It began as subtle nuances, more attention at Robyn's place, more interest in her children, grew to become so overt, even the other wives couldn't ignore it anymore. And the fans? They've been screaming about it for years. Does anyone recall the Christmas episode? While most of the Brown children didn't even receive a call from their father, Robyn's kids were opening presents from Kody beneath a radiant Christmas tree. No phone call for Savannah. No visit for Gabe or Garrison. Just silence. This wasn't just some innocent scheduling conflict. It was a choice. One that loudly communicated to the other children where they stood in their father's universe. And then there's Isabel. Her spinal surgery wasn't just a standard medical procedure. It was a watershed emotional moment. She was obviously agonizing, body and soul. And yet, still, her father couldn't muster the strength to appear. And yet, the same man who could not be there for his daughter at one of the most difficult times in her life. Later, he was comforting Aurora in a panic attack, holding on to her, carrying her, being there in every sense. One daughter was forced to fight on her own, and the other was wrapped in care. No one missed the symbolism. Kody has always maintained that he was just following COVID guidelines, doing what was necessary to keep everybody safe. But increasingly, those answers unraveled, because the same concerns about safety never prevented him from frequent visits to Robyn's home, where he essentially lived full-time. He didn't physically distance himself from the rest of the family at all. He emotionally distanced himself too. And Robyn? She didn't simply allow it to happen. She profited from it. This wasn't a change that happened overnight. It was a gradual, calculated reorganizing of the family unit, one in which Robyn's branch of the tree received sunshine, while the others remained shivering in darkness. Garrison's funeral was not just a sad goodbye. It was a breaking point, an emotional, symbolic, and relational one. For a host of fans and loved ones, it was the time when all the hurt that had been relegated and quietly suffered, at last, insisted on being recognized. What ought to have been a shared, sacred moment of bereavement instead revealed a hurtful chasm, a demonstration of detachment, self-absorption, and entrenched emotional fissures. But when Mykelti came out on Patreon and said that she no longer felt connected to Robyn after seeing how she acted at Garrison's funeral, folks were shocked. That same Mykelti who for years had been a staunch defender of Robyn sometimes come to her defense, some might say, without hesitation. But this time she did not hold back. She characterized Robyn's demeanor during the funeral as sour, even disrespectful. And that's no trivial observation. That's not some careless, throwaway remark. That's one of the Brown kids stating out in public that on the day they buried their brother, the so-called peacemaker made it all about her. It's easy to picture the emotional burden that had to have been on Janelle, Christine, and the siblings who really knew Garrison. They were grief-stricken, raw, bare, and heartbreaking. Robyn, for her part, who contributed to the emotional wedge between Garrison and his father, reportedly was guarded, cold, perhaps even resentful. There were rumors she attempted to deflect blame, suggesting it was Janelle and Christine's decisions that broke up the family. But on that day, all that didn't matter. The one thing that should have mattered was the boy who wasn't returning. For Kody's older kids, the ones whose birthdays he missed, whose tears were dismissed as rebellion, whose hurt was denied, this was more than another letdown. It was grief wrapped in betrayal. Seeing Kody and Robyn arrive so emotionally distant, after so many ways they disappointed Garrison during his life, wasn't just painful. It was devastating. And of course, it's simple to criticize Mykelti on the outside. How could she continue defending Robyn and Kody when everyone can see that so many of her sisters have been in pain? But that's not really the truth. When you're raised in a family that large, 18 kids vying for emotional elbow room, sometimes you hold on to whatever scraps of love and approval you can get, particularly when you've spent so many years being put down, diminished, or pushed to the side. Mykelti was frequently described, even on the show, as the noisy one, the over-the-top one, the kid who always needed a little extra reassurance, And in an ocean of siblings, perhaps squeaking loudly was her method of being noticed. So when Robyn came along, giving compliments, gentleness, or even just made her feel special, can we blame Mykelti for clinging to that? This isn't just about denial. It's about emotional survival. Maybe, just maybe, defending Robyn and Kody is Mykelti's way of staying in their orbit, staying in that small, safe zone where, in her heart, she still feels like she has parents. Because the reality is, for many children raised in broken families, the prospect of being excluded feels worse than the sting of persistent disappointment, so they avert their gaze. They minimize what is occurring. They remain silent, albeit at someone else's expense. But that silence, it still hurts. Loyalty that won't confront reality isn't love, it's fear in disguise. And the silence Mykelti kept while Isabel endured, while Savannah was making do in a cold trailer, while Garrison moved further away from his dad, that silence wasn't innocuous. It hurt not only her siblings, but also viewers who recognized themselves in those sorrowful moments. There's room for empathy, of course, but there has to be room for accountability as well. Mykelti is maybe trying to hold on to the only parental relationship that still feels right. But in trying to do so, she's standing in the way of an actual kind of pain. And eventually, that kind of misplaced loyalty comes at a price. Because by the time fans sit down to watch Sister Wives, they're not just watching raw family life. They're watching a show, cut, trimmed, and shaped by producers. That doesn't mean it's all fake. It means we're seeing it through a lens, one that can tilt the story, redirect blame, or soften hard truths. And over the course of the last few seasons, it's become difficult to overlook. Kody and Robyn are more and more presented as the misunderstood ones, the emotional casualties of a dysfunctional family, rather than being regarded as the ones responsible for dismantling it. We've seen Robyn tearfully ask for peace, while the emotional wreckage of the rest of the family is clipped into a background montage. We've heard Kody talk about being lonely, but the scenes gloss over how he ignored half his children for months on end. The show leans into their emotional moments, but often lets their responsibility slip quietly into the shadows. It's not just what's shown, it's what's left unsaid. And then there's Mykelti, her ongoing public endorsement of Kody and Robyn, her decision to speak when most of the other siblings remain quiet. It leaves one asking, is this all about love or fear? Or is she now involved in a larger story the show must continue to tell? Let's get real. Loyalty is great TV, particularly when it creates conflict, particularly when it polarizes opinion. And in a show like Sister Wives, where emotional tension propels each episode, being the lone child who continues to side with Dad could be the key to keeping her plot relevant. Again, it has nothing to do with saying it's all phony. It has to do with realizing we're only being shown pieces of the complete picture. The other stuff, what really goes on during those moments without cameras, is something we might never find out. But we can still see the patterns, and currently, that pattern seems to protect some family members at the expense of others. We've watched this family grow, shatter, and try to rebuild for over 10 years. But beyond the sit-down interviews and scripted smiles lies something raw, real heartbreak. Children growing up without emotional consistency, wives giving everything, only to be discarded, and kids like Garrison, asking for connection, only to be met with silence. And then Mykelti, torn between what once was, what is, and what she's still trying to hold on to. Her allegiance may appear treasonous to others, but perhaps, just perhaps, it's her means of surviving in the devastation she never had the authority to repair. But silence when there is harm done doesn't mend. It secludes. and acting like there's love when love is an illusion, under an atmosphere of favoritism doesn't necessarily mean it exists. Fame makes it all complicated. Fame enlarges wounds. Fame puts pressure on already vulnerable relationships. Fame makes everyday people struggling to make sense of things into heroes or villains, depending on how the tale goes. But it also asks us to consider our families, our habits, and the ways in which we love, forgive, and shield. So I ask you, where does your sympathy fall? Do you imagine Mykelti standing up for the other siblings who were left behind? Or will she continue to cling to the conception of family she's terrified to lose? I'm Anya, and this is Reality Recap. If this knocked you as hard as it knocked me, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice counts, and we'll be right here as the next episode plays out.